today for the panel discussion will be Jan-Erik Viitala of Axopar Boats. We have Tony Castro, the international yacht designer, and Jarrod Seymour, who is the VP Marine Segment Leader at Garmin. Thank you guys for joining us. We all know that consumer trends and technology have been changing and evolving, especially over the last 12 months or so. In this discussion, I'd like to explore a little bit about how those changes and evolutions are shaping boat functionality, boat usage, and ultimately boat design. First off, I'd like maybe to start with you, Jan-Erik, to talk a little bit about how you see consumer trends changing, your experience at Axopar more recently, maybe in the last year, 2 years, and your experience of the pandemic, and what boat buyers and what consumers are after now.
Yeah. Thanks, Ed, for having me. I'm actually quite finding it interesting to join in on this panel, because let's say it this way, yacht of the future is in the size range we're talking about, where let's say on the smaller side of products, with the Axopar's 37-foot and now with our upcoming 45, so we're venturing into the 15-meter range. But going into the history and how we've seen the development of consumer behavior the last 2 years, but I would also especially say that this has been really accentuated due to the COVID pandemic that has been global, is that people actually are now looking seriously into boating as a way of life, and in a way how you can let's say explore your surroundings without being in the need to have air travel or travel long distances, that more or less you're having a boat next to your home, next to your dock, and utilizing these for day trips and more or less joining in with families and friends. So this, I would say, clearly is accentuated now the last 2 years.
So in terms of, Jarrod, just on the change in consumer, obviously technology has been one of the big changes as well of late. I mean, it's been R&D spending, investment, and time taken in R&D is one of the few things that hasn't been blown off course, it seems, by the recent disruptions we've all had and had to deal with. Can you tell me a little bit of insight into Garmin's thinking about the changing consumer, and how you're embracing them with new technology, and how you see that playing out?
Sure, and yeah, it's really interesting. I think I would say there's been a big revolution, I think, in the last 10 years that's really coming into the marine industry, and that's really people. Yeah, I guess it kind of started probably with smartphones, and the more people have smartphones and connectivity, and how they want that in all their parts of their lives, just like you might use in your house or your car. And that's really come into play in the marine industry for sure, and people want their boats to have all the same fancy features or even user interfaces that you have in your, like on your smartphone or stuff in your house. I think what's interesting this year is, I think the lockdowns and the shutdowns and kind of the push to go outside, it's kind of two things. One, there's a big push, like Jan-Erik mentioned, to enjoy the outdoors. We've certainly seen that in marine, but actually all of Garmin's businesses, that a big push of more outdoor activities. But at the same time, in the business side, I mean, we're not going to trade shows, we're doing everything electronically. So we've actually seen it accelerate some of the interest of electronics and technology into boating, and even accelerate. People want that extra, want to be connected everywhere, even more so than before. So it's kind of interesting how that's really accelerated the technology push.
Because you've got there's the combination there of increasing desires to be out on the water, to be isolated, to have an experience over perhaps the status symbol of a boat. Tony, this is the critical question, I guess, is how do these evolving trends, how do they, or how are they manifesting themselves in boat design? I mean, we've seen these changes happening over the last 2, 3, 4 years, but they've all been accelerated, I guess, in the last few months. Can you talk a little bit about how, on the production boat side, how is that trickling down into actually pen on paper and the reality of the product?
Yeah, well, there are two sides of it. Some of it is reactive to what's going on and what we perceive is the people's desire. But I must say the majority of my time is to create something that I believe they will want, but they don't yet know about it. So, and I would say to react to something comes obviously from the clients, from the either the boat builders, which in turn obviously comes from the dealers, and then from the users themselves. So there is certainly that's ongoing. I mean, it happens ongoing all the time. There's always some feedback about obviously some of the things that we introduced, which they hadn't seen before, or general requests. Usually, in all departments, whether it's to do to make maintenance easier or some features or other. So that's what we do. And as I said, so some we react to input. Quite a lot of the time, what we're trying to do is to create new things and based on what we think they want. So there's a bit of a sort of a belief in what you think that is going to work. I mean, Axopar is a perfect example of this.
There's a passion behind it, more or less driving you to create something new and showing what you're capable of in a way. So you have your own. Sorry, I'm interrupting, Tony. Because we've been talking to each other and we've been sparring with the ideas of being able to create something that you truly believe in yourself in, but of course you need to have a certain filter, is this doable or not? But it's really nice to see that you're able to convey your own thoughts and ideas into a real life product by this process.
Yeah, and then of course when you have the money to do it, these things happen. Other times the progress is relatively slower because the opportunities to do something are relatively few, or I was going to say that for some established clients or some established builders, sometimes it's harder to push ahead because they are scared about making everything else they make obsolete. So to make big jumps like Axopar did, you really need to start from zero. So you with a free, completely free image so when you launch the product as they did, you create the whole package is a whole new package.
Given the need now to differentiate yourself as a brand with your message and your look of the boats and things, and to offer unique features, do you sense that that's encourage a more sort of ambitious?
Yeah, the pressure is greater. And the courage is greater.
Yeah.
So they have much more courage to allow us to do that. In some cases of mine, you can tell the difference between the clients. It's very distinct. Very different. And of course, then over a period of time, they end up achieving very different things.
But one of the interesting things, and just bringing it back a little bit to Jarrod on this, because and Jan-Erik as well, because we've talked, Jan-Erik, in the past, you and I, about how that changing consumer is after a boating experience rather than that ownership buzz, rather than the status symbol of a boat. Are you guys working, and I talk about you guys, designers, boat builders, suppliers, are you working differently now in terms of how closely you work with boat builders? Jarrod, for instance, do you are you involved in the boat building process earlier now than perhaps you would have been a decade ago?
I think, definitely. And I think it's multiple things that really contribute to that. I think one real key difference that I think was the trend was already happening, but I think much accelerated this year as the new boaters that are coming into the market that like Tony mentioned, you have to really differentiate yourself from other competitors for them to choose your design over somebody else's. But they have way different expectations than the older generation or the previous generation of the boaters that are out there. And so we've really had to shift some of our R&D efforts, and especially around user experience, to make sure that we're keeping up and hopefully staying ahead of all of our competition and providing the user experience that these new boaters want. And it goes into, before we would just work with the builder on making sure we have enough space to mount, electronics and things like that around. Now we have products that are part of the electrical infrastructure of the boat, and so you have to really start at the very beginning to understand how the electrical infrastructure is really going to be laid out. And then our products are kind of along the way and might even be spread out, all the way throughout the boat. And that's way different than 10 years ago.
It seems to me we often hear, Tony, you probably roll your eyes a bit at this, but we often hear that some of the key trend design influences for our industry and on the manufacturing side as well is the auto sector and the home interiors sector. Is that still the case, or
I think it's very fashionable to talk about that, but there is a massive difference between the automotive industry and us. I mean, the automotive, they spend millions developing a product that costs thousands, and we barely get thousands, to develop a boat that can cost millions. It's completely the other way around. And we of course, one of the things that is driving the products like Axopar towards simplicity is the desire to sell greater numbers. So they trading off, they trying to convince people that, you don't need all this stuff, the boat floats, come on, go out to your mates, it's good enough. And that way, you manage to do what they did, to sell, incredible amount of boats compared with any other builder. Certainly on their first few years was extraordinary. So and they continue, that kind of a trend is now with us because everybody now is trying to catch up with Axopar, and going forward, less is more.
I would actually say, going to your first thoughts about the pressure more or less you're getting, and also what Jarrod about the pressure, I would use the word competition. And in this way, competition is harsh in this segment, and we have a lot of companies that fight over the same customers, but there's a true benefit in the eyes of the customers in this. And that's the number one, that it really keeps the great companies on their toes. They need to listen to their customers. They need to keep innovating on and coming up with new interesting products in order to keep to get the attention in a way. And if you're not doing it, then your brand is going to be more or less fading out over time. So in this way, the really harsh competitive environment the boating industry is in actually helps create better solutions for our customers and better, more solid foundations for strong brands in offering, let's say, like everything from new technology, new functionality, new ways of working, but also in a way of new experiences, because that's number one right now. People don't anymore get on a boat, drive to an anchor point, drink champagne and drive back. They actually want to do something more because they have been boating probably now. So we have two different boaters. One is the new boaters, which will be happy with this, but still they don't want to be spending the amount of money this, let's say, activity is taking from them. Or then the other way, you're having people that have been boating for years, decades already, also in the sense that they don't want to do only that activity anymore, and now they want to experience more. So this is, really interesting, and this is also why the technology, the new development in technology the last years actually helps us also develop new, cooler products in a more streamlined and cost-effective way. Virtual reality being one, rapid modeling being second. Tony is all aware of these, so which is creating like a myriad of opportunities where you can test before. I understand 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you had a piece of paper, more or less, to show your clients, this is what I want to do. And the clients couldn't understand it because it was a two-dimensional simple drawing, and it went just completely overboard. And now with virtual reality, for example, you can actually go in so deep into details in let's say, conveying your message. I think the new technology is helping you there also, Tony.
Well, let's talk about that virtual reality, because the changing consumer is one thing, but obviously changing manufacturing techniques is another potentially big area that can transform what the boats of tomorrow look like, and what, how quickly and rapidly they come to market.
True.
Yeah. I mean, the builders can only use the technology that matches the volume of sales. Mm-hmm. So if a boat sells in a greater numbers, they will choose a certain technology, say. If they don't have that chance and they only sell 10 boats a year, then of course they opt for another. Often, they have to, work out the cost of doing it one way or another. They may well like the idea of building it in a sophisticated way, but if the product cannot stand that cost, they are forced to the old-fashioned bucket and brush. That's why that still exists nowadays. Widespread, there's still lots of very basic, very, very basic construction going on products where the customer doesn't really ask, doesn't really affect him so much. And of course, he's price conscious as well as everything else. But I think in the case of Axopar, for example, if they're selling, 300, 400 boats, the same style per year, I think, that's another ball game. Then they need to invest a bit more money again, but they will get to a point where these things are made with just one operator, watching a machine do everything. So it's just that the technology is already there. It's just that our industry doesn't have the throughput to justify the use of that technology.
One of the positives to come out of COVID has been what we hear is the evidence coming through is that new people are coming into boating, and a sort of affordability is increasingly important because these people are coming in at the bottom end, which is great for our industry longer term. We talk about the sort of smaller producers building one-offs and semi-custom boats for clientele where price is not their main concern. That industry will always be there. But do you see the growth potential in the Axopars and that sort of side of the market?
I remember, speaking with Axopar about doing 80-foot boats 3 years ago or something like that. And I'm doing a 40-meter right now, which is probably not exactly looking like an Axopar, but it has similar kind of DNA, if you want to call it that. It's a no frills big boat for a lot less money, a lot less power, a lot less cost to run, a lot less everything. Unfortunately, a lot less electronics. but the idea is that we want to make it simple to the owner of those boats to be persuaded that they can use them themselves. They don't need crew. I'm talking about obviously 30 meters plus, right? But there are plenty of people with money, but they would like a product that they could maybe have fun themselves, not just surrounded by an army of crew.
The changing boater in general, they're not after just going to a destination, they're after the full experience, right? So they would rather be able to operate it themselves versus have a whole crew of doing that. And we've seen that with the way customers want to interact with our product. They just want it to be so intuitive. The newer generation of boaters don't really care about how it works in the background, which the previous generation did. So
is it the reality that the boater of tomorrow, he's going to be, or he or she is going to be a lot less engaged in the actual, they want their experience from it, but they don't want to get into the nuts and bolts. They don't want to spend too much of the time when they're not on the boat worrying about the boat or having to do research or it's going to be an easy experience.
Yeah, I think on the sailing boats, they don't even want to own them.
Yeah.
Right. And there's some, I have a little business here in England where you can rent a boat ready to race. Mm-hmm. So you can arrive at the dock, jump, go racing, pay 500 euros a day, right? And then drop the boat and go to the pub, right? And the boat gets taken care of and is ready for them. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, that's what they want because they're busy lives and they don't have time for everything. There are, for example, I'm working as well a lot on sort of creating events. So, for example, instead of launching a regatta or an event for the Saturday, we are organizing the event for Saturday morning, so that by lunchtime they can go away and still have Saturday afternoon with their families or their kids and do other things. So the sport is changing, the experiences are adapting to people. And if you offer these opportunities, then you get new customers that you wouldn't have got before to come join and play with you. So there's all sorts of interesting things being developed because of people needs are changing, as you say. They keen on experience. I'd like to, they like to talk about their experience on Instagram and so on.
What we already see, we see actually a really good opportunity with, for example, give you a few, charter. We have dealers that are organizing charter business, so that the Axopars they are selling, they always have a few Axopars as charter. They get a customer on board, he spends a nice day on board, everything gets catered to his own expectations, more or less getting in and getting out. And they start to see these customers as repeated customers. And in a half year, 1 year or 2 year, they end up buying an Axopar. Yeah. So in terms, we are actually with boat clubbing ideas and especially as you said, that going back into the 60s, more or less, and the 70s, how the boat clubs were organized, this brought people into boating. And this we have at some point forgot the whole way how to attract new boaters. The charter business could be one. What we're also seeing is that we're having big marinas in different locations around the world where the marinas are owning 1, 2, or 3 Axopars. They usually have 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 meter yachts at their docks, but the 37 is, let's say, like a leisure boat. So if somebody wants to go out for a day, half a day, just to have fun, the boat club itself offers a 37 for them to use, so that the customers don't take out their big yacht with the crew and everything. They get 4 people on board, 6 people on board on a 37, hopefully in the future on the 45, go out for a day, spend a day, come back. And that's another way of doing new business.
Yeah, I think so.
And I would say this is also one thing for Garmin and all the new electronics manufacturers out there, is that the easier I see the development of user interfaces, the easier it also becomes for a new owner to get into the boating. I was almost interrupting you, Tony, earlier that I was going to mention that in the past, how skilled you were as a captain were measured about the amount of gauges you could read and explain on the dashboard. Yeah. And this is completely out these days. People are used to their phones. People are used to their iPads. It's simple. It's intuitive. It needs to work. You don't need to have a math degree behind how this is working. And that is what I so much love, that, again, competition is pushing, but also internal innovation, the desire of innovation from Garmin, other manufacturers all around, which again creates this ecosystem of new opportunities and actually better products for our boaters.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's really, people just don't care to know the details in the background anymore. It's all about just easy to use and intuitive. And we have a phrase we use a lot. It's the power of simple, and it's really just simple things are really powerful. It's just, it can be easy and intuitive, and it's more enjoyable for the end user. I think one thing that's really helped with that is, you mentioned virtual reality before, is I think these simulation tools and things, we don't, in the past, you'd have to try something, build it, go try it, see how it works, and it's more trial and error. And I think these simulation tools have really helped us, and we use it on our user experience design that we do for all of our products, and you simulate, and it makes it a much quicker design cycle to get to something good, because you don't have to actually fully implement it and go test it as much with the as a big of an investment when you can simulate, and the simulation tools have really helped with that.
Yeah, the advantage, of course, that Garmin has got is that your market is, all clients of all boats that are potentially all your clients. So your market is massive compared with mine or my clients or Axopar. So obviously you are in a slightly different, understandably so, in a slightly different game, right? But of course you are. I mean, it's amazing what you've been achieving, because you are into everything, not just not marine. You are in all sorts of areas, creating new instrumentation and so on. So you've done really amazing stuff, really. And probably you could have done more if you didn't have such a wide market, because it takes time to do all these things. So in sailing, you probably could have, you've gone even further had you had the people and the time. I think the market is there for you. And as you said, every boat could use it. So it's,
it's, well, and they're wildly different. And that's actually one of the challenges, is how do you design the right perfect product for, that's 100 euros. And then, for an user, the beginner, right? And all they care about is catching a fish. And then the whole other end of the spectrum on the big yachts. And that's a big challenge in having the focus to get it right for each of those. And we spend a lot of time to do that, and have different visions for each of the product lines. But it is a massive job, but it's really important, I think, for the future success, really, to have that simple vision for each product line.
Fascinating, guys. I need to wrap it up shortly, but can I just ask you, put you on the spot a little bit, and just ask each of you what you think, your vision of stepping on a boat, a production boat, a 30, 40 foot, 50 foot motorboat in 2-3 years' time. How will the experience be different, do you think?
We already see it today. And it's just a question of time when we see this being much more broad reach than it is today. But one thing, for example, for me, is the user experience with stabilizers and with gyro systems. That is one thing that I see that is mostly going to be changing in the future. So that because the gyro system, not only is it helping you and us as a manufacturer to have the boat at rest while it's at rest and at anchor, these systems in the future will help guide the boat and keep the boat stable even in harsh conditions while running. And that's also a huge difference in sensation of how easy a boat is to drive when you have a good functioning stabilizer system that also takes away the roll motions when you're driving in wave conditions. So that's one thing. Additionally, I would still say that automation, and that is probably something that's going to be interesting for Garmin to talk about, because that is already seeing, but it's interesting to see what will happen in 2-3 years when it comes to auto docking, monitoring on board systems, electronics, all of these. But all in all, I would say that people still want in the future to see easier boating as one topic. So as you said, clean them down, keep them maintained, keep them working, and don't do so much fuss on them. And I think that people are in the future going to accept the fact that if you're able to buy a product for less than today, you are also ready to make a few compromises in terms of comfort. You don't need to bring your house with you on a boat if you're only going to spend 10 hours on board. You don't need a washer and dryer combination on the boat. You're not going to need sat-nav television or anything, because it's never going to be used. So if this enables you to buy a product or upgrade a size in your boat, because you're not bringing on this myriad of complexity, which just for us as a manufacturer skyrockets development cost and skyrockets the end price the customer needs to pay for the boat, I see a clear future in this, just to say it short.
Yeah. Jarrod?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, Jan-Erik hit it right on the head on the automation. That's exactly what's going to be my prediction. I think in 5 years from now, the automation will, I guess to be clear, I don't think the boats are really just going to go drive themselves on a whole trip, right? Because that doesn't provide the best user experience. But I think the automation is going to help, and the certain focus areas, like for safety, making sure the boat, the user doesn't do something that gets themselves in trouble, and especially the more challenging areas like docking. Today, I think the sensor technology that's available really cannot auto dock a boat right now. But I think in the next 5 years, there'll be some new sensor technology and other pieces that will able to do the auto docking. And that's going to be a big enhancement to the user experience, making it easier for the customers to enjoy their trip out on the water.
And Tony, do you have anything to add?
Well, there's so many things. I mean, we didn't even talk about things like, propulsion and all this love affair with hybrid and, no fossil fuels, solar power, sustainability. I guess also more space. Everybody wants more space for the money. I do sense a bit less of possibly less interest in pure speed per se. I think people are more enamored with, enough, but more of the rest kind of thing. And I would say, from a buyer point of view, there'll be ever more choice, which must be quite difficult to be a buyer, actually. Trying to figure out, how these things really compare. It's not easy, I'm sure. So depending whether it's sail or power, there are obviously different things. In sailing, of course, there's so much going on with foiling in particular, and possibly far too much speed for the average person. And on power certainly is, make it easier and cheaper to enjoy your boat. So consumption and all this, I think, is going to become ever more important, more efficient engines, and so on and so on. There's a lot going on.
It's to sum up, it's an exciting time for our industry. Great potential.
I think
absolutely.
There are ever more buyers, and certainly we, compared with other activities, we're still quite small, really. We could get a lot more people, but we just got to make it easier. It's if you compare, for example, what it takes for somebody to go to a gym equipped with thousands and thousands of fantastic equipment, You know, he pays, 20, 30 euros a month. That's it. And he has so much to enjoy for that money. I mean, we are so far away from that. You know, we are asking that same person to spend thousands and thousands, you know, for the same hours of enjoyment. So we got to try really hard to increase our popularity amongst those other millions of people out there. That's the challenge. That's the challenge.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Jan-Erik, for your time, and obviously Jarrod as well. It's been good talking to you, and hopefully that boat of the future, we'll see it sooner than we think.